What an excellent day for an exorcism.
Podcast. I am your host, Colin Peters.
John Rochetter.
Jeff Manfred.
Just Guy here.
That is Greg Molt, but we call him Newport. Old man.
I wonder why.
Today we have a very special guest with us. He comes from Scotland or many other places.
Scotland and Ireland primarily. Yes.
Okay. He is a Lord of the Night, amongst many other things. Ladies and gentlemen, our one and only vampire, Lord Damien McDonovan. Lord Damien, thank you very much. Welcome to the show.
Thank you guys. Thank you for having me on, Colin. Colin, it's been a while since I actually got to see you.
It has.
And some of the other guys at the table too. We've known each other for quite some time, but I think this is the first time in a while we've all been in the same room.
Yes.
So, Lord Damien, please tell us about yourself for our listeners.
All right, well, let's see where to start with a 337-year-old history. I was born in Scotland, became a pirate, and went to Ireland, tried to regain my family's history and honor and wealth, and ended up becoming a vampire instead. So I've been here in the States for about 300 years now, and I have recently taken it upon myself to make a living as a horror host, a la Elvira and Svengoolie and the like. So I actually have a TV show right now, which I also put onto my YouTube channel. The TV show is called Damien's Dreadfuls. It's on my YouTube page. YouTube user is Damien McDonovan. And also on Facebook under Damien McDonovan, and Twitter and Instagram Lord_McDonovan. So you can check me out in all of those places. But yeah, I'm happy to be here for this episode today.
Alrighty, this episode is a special one to have you on, because today we are going to be talking about the classic of classic horror movies, The Exorcist, written by
Peter
Blatty. And the director, I believe his name is also William
Friedkin.
William Friedkin.
I've heard Friedkin or Friedkin, but we've been hearing a lot of Friedkin.
Freaking.
Yes.
Friedkin sounds right to me.
So, basically, I guess the way to start is this movie came out in 1973. It took about a year of production and had a long list of issues, to say the least.
Like 9 deaths, I think it was?
9 deaths, a burn set that some people say supposedly burned down and then didn't burn down, but nobody was there, so they don't know for sure.
Linda Blair, the actress, she had to have bodyguards with her 6 months after the film released because she had received a lot of death threats from a lot of religious zealots, so that was one thing.
True.
And both Linda and the mother,
Ellen Burstyn.
Ellen Burstyn were injured on set doing stunts on set
with
both
their
of them.
back, I think.
Both backs in different areas.
Yes.
And of course there's allegedly a real serial killer in the movie.
Oh,
really?
Yes.
No.
Really? I didn't know that either.
Yeah, there's a medical technician in the scene where she's having tests done in the hospital.
Oh yeah,
and going for reality, he actually had some of the actual hospital technicians there performing the procedure, and the one guy was arrested sometime after the movie came out. He was actually arraigned and prosecuted and convicted of murder, and while he was in prison, there was a whole other slew of evidence coming forward that he may have been linked to the serial killing of a host of gay men in the area.
Oh my God.
Wow, that's intense.
And despite all that, this movie ended up becoming Warner Brothers' highest grossing movie if you adjust inflection, because of course ticket pricing was different back then, but still their highest grossing movie of all time.
I think it was one of the highest grossing movies in general.
It's definitely the highest grossing horror movie of all time when adjusted for inflation.
But did it break its record when it came out in 2017? I think it may have.
I don't think if adjusted for inflation.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, just to give our audience, in case if anybody hasn't ever seen The Exorcist,
there's something wrong with you. It's been out forever. clearly you're under a rock or whatever. It's here. It's probably the most iconic horror movie.
Some people are not huge horror fans.
Well, then there's something wrong with them too.
Yes.
You don't even have to be a horror fan to enjoy this movie. Like, there's so much in there. It could take your spirituality. You get to see a lot more from different aspects.
Agreed.
It's not just a horror movie.
There is
Yes.
a meaning that does go away with it, and I'm not sure if it was Linda Blair or if it was William Peter Blatty who was the one who said that he wanted to take away from it and didn't want to make it seem like an evil wins kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But he did. It was either him or Friedkin said that they did want a message to it. It wasn't just supposed to be a horror movie.
Oh no, yeah, it's all about redemption, faith.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is prevalent in the movie.
Very.
It's essentially putting your faith to the test. Like,
it is.
It's definitely with the scene with the two priests at the end fighting the demon was a great aspect of that, because you ultimately, if you watch the director's cut, you see a lot more the priest fighting with himself whether or not he wants to take the demon from her and kill himself. It was pretty much like the ultimate sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. And that actually influenced even just the casting of the movie too. The goal to put that kind of message in the film influenced the casting. Like Jack Nicholson was actually up for one of the roles, and they insisted that they didn't want him because he didn't come off as holy enough.
Right. I did come across that. I did.
Wow.
Yeah,
that makes sense for that time.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Is it really shocking though to hear Jack Nicholson wasn't holy enough?
Just really Shining, for instance. Yeah.
I mean, Shining would happen years later, but still.
I mean, I guess they could have replaced Linda Blair with Jack Nicholson.
Probably a lot less makeup would be involved.
Yeah.
Can you imagine him doing the voice, the demon voice?
I think Nicholson could probably turn his head all the way around.
Well, of course, the fact that Jack Nicholson was far too unholy in this weekend later influenced the director of The Witches of Eastwick to cast him as Satan.
What an excellent day for an exorcism. Can you imagine
Another
that?
Warner Brothers movie. So, for all our listeners, let's go through the movie. And Lord Damien, do you want to be the one to go through the movie and say your 2 cents about the description of it?
Do we want to start off like scene by scene, or do we just want to do like a full like go over to the whole film?
Just like a real quick synopsis interpretation.
All right. Well, a quick synopsis is that first off, we start with Father Marin questioning his faith after walking through the archaeological dig site.
Played by Max von Sydow.
Yes.
Is it Sydow? Sydow? I think it's
Sydow. I think is the pronunciation I've been hearing a lot from people.
I've never been quite sure, but he then later is called on after an exorcism is needed when a young girl in it's Boston, right?
Georgetown.
Georgetown.
Didn't they say Georgetown?
It is in the Washington area.
Okay.
Washington
D.C. That's right. Begins acting strangely, and her mother eventually, who is not, I guess the family in the book I know is not Catholic. I don't remember if they're actually Catholic in the movie.
They're not.
They're not. Okay.
No.
I don't think there's any sign of religion besides the priests that have any influence of religion at all.
Comes in.
I think there is just some crucifixes on the wall, but they're more or less for decoration rather than them specifying that they are religious.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the young girl becomes possessed, acting extremely violently, and eventually the priests are Father Marin and a younger priest. I need a young priest and an old priest. Are called upon to attempt to exorcise this demon from this young girl, and obviously horror ensues until the very end, and then further because there are 5 sequels.
Was it 5? Oh, it was something. It might as well be 5.
I'm pretty sure I think there's a couple of sequels. There's a couple of prequels. There were 2 prequels made at the exact same time, supposedly going over the exact same story.
Yeah, pretty much.
Was that the one with Tom Wilkinson? I remember that one.
The third one was actually really good. Because that told a different story with George C. Scott.
Well, the third one was actually not even supposed to be an Exorcist movie. William Peter Blatty wanted to do. I think he wrote a book called Legion,
Okay.
And he wanted to make that into the movie, and that's what Exorcist 3 originally was, but Warner Brothers had seen it and said, oh, we like this, let's make it
it's the same author.
Same author.
We can connect it.
And he had even said, we don't even have an Exorcist scene in this movie. So they went back and reshot it and slapped the label on.
Okay.
But they said they hated 2 so much that they
2
were
is
like,
an
why would you even want to?
2 is an abomination.
Why would you want to continue?
It's like this franchise is like it had Exorcist and then Exorcist 2. Then you have Jaws, which was nominated for Best Picture. Then you had Jaws 2, which was nowhere near comparison. But Exorcist 2 was even worse off the rails. I mean, if I can get into that movie, it was a train wreck.
I'd say honestly, the only thing you really get out of Exorcist 2 is what the demon's real name is.
Yeah,
that's it. That's it.
And that was even in the book.
But the thing is, like, it is the most ridiculous name because you call it Pazuzu, and I'm like, I cannot take that name seriously, no matter what you say. Even if you say in a demonic voice, I lose my shit every time. Because, seriously, I'm like, your name is Pazuzu? I would not, like, I'm out.
I can't take that whole movie seriously.
Honestly, whenever I hear the name Pazuzu, the first thing that comes to mind is Professor Farnsworth from the episode of Futurama. he's got like that winged gargoyle pet of his that's named Pazuzu.
Yes!
That like leaves in the beginning of the episode and then shows up as like a Deus Ex Machina at the end of it saying Pazuzu! It's like that's all I hear. That's all I hear. But it is actually a real demon. It comes from Mesopotamian.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
That's god.
It's the
Demon of Famine, I think.
Demon of Wind or something?
It's supposedly the Lord of the Winds, represented by the Southwest Winds, and it's a demon of plague.
Yes. I'm glad that was not explained in this movie. The first one. I'm glad it was not explained. It didn't need to be.
Yeah, the locust thing, I mean, is involved in the original mythology, and that's heavily explored in the second one, of course, with...
Yeah, but why would you want to see that? You can sit through, what was it, an hour and a half of BS for a local scene. No. And Pazuzu.
Yeah. Well, that's probably why they didn't actually name the demon during this movie.
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't. The devil's fine.
Yeah.
That's all you really need.
That's all you needed.
But of course, throughout the exorcism, you get hints of the conversation with Father Merrin. You get hints that the demon is claiming to be the devil and Satan, but you can tell he's also lying. Mm-hmm. It's like there's a lot of hints of that, and of course, when we get the statue reveal at the end, it's like that's Pazuzu. That's what Pazuzu is portrayed as. That's what it looks like.
But then even there's a scene too where Linda Blair, or Reagan as they say in the movie is the character she plays, she actually says in the bed, "Oh, I'm the devil."
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's all they say.
Yes.
There's no specific name, no nothing. So.
Right.
I think it's just one of those things in writing maybe that they just kind of overlooked and just raises questions more, really.
That could be. But I love how Pazuzu, even at least just the statue, it shows up a lot in pop culture nowadays since The Exorcist. Is like because it's the same statue actually shows up twice in Ridley Scott's movie Legend.
Really?
It's you can see a shot of it in the swamp before the giant evil tree when Jack comes across Meg Mucklebones in the swamp and everything. The statue is there, and then it shows up again in the chamber where Tim Curry's character Darkness is holding the unicorn to be killed later on. The statue shows up there also.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Huh.
I didn't even know that.
Mm-hmm. And it shows up in an episode of the Venture Brothers. this past season, it shows up there. That's the best reference, obviously.
But honestly, like, the movie probably has been parodied so many times and made so many other Exorcist movies because of it.
Oh, of course.
Like, because of how
for sure.
popular it is. Like, that whole demon possession was the scariest thing at that time. Like, people fainting, whatever, because you're not used to that.
The spider walk.
That actually was not inserted until the 2000 director's cut. That was not in the original cut. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it was, but it was I don't know if it was a studio choice or a director's choice, but they got rid of it for the theatrical version. I think because it took away.
I think it was a director's choice because I think I remember Freakin' talking about how it took away from the impact of Ellen Burstyn's character just finding out her best friend died.
Yeah,
and I think that's why he said it wouldn't have had that much like of a shock and awe.
It was also, I think it was also a technical decision too, because the actress who was doing it, the
contortionist,
the contortionist who was doing it, they had her on wires suspended above the steps so that she could do it safely. But because of the wires which they couldn't really edit out very well back in the 70s,
time.
they also her touch on the steps wasn't heavy enough. It didn't look heavy enough to be realistic.
And what they did though, even for that time, was actually really impressive. Like, did you know that when they did the room, Reagan's room, they literally froze that room with like 4 or 5 heavy air conditioners.
Yeah,
and they had to make sure it was like 40 below just to see their breath.
Yeah.
Linda Blair said to this day she hates cold weather.
It's cold weather because of that scene. Those scenes.
I mean, that sounds worse than the ice bowl that the Packers and the Cowboys were in the 60s. That was what, -20, -15, -20, and they said,
like
"Oh,
that.
you got to be -40 before you can even go in." Plus, with lights and people in the room and with the takes, it will get warm in there.
Yeah,
and then it will take the breath away.
Yeah,
and if they left them running, I'm sure the audio would have picked up, but still, clever effect. I mean, and
great.
Of course, and that's also another example of Friedkin like treating his actors like crap.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean,
the torture that they said.
They went through hell with this movie. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock, they're notorious directors for really getting the realism out of their actors, whether they like it or not.
Well, it looks fantastic though. Like when they actually put him in the real area of what they're doing with it. Like, it may suck on the actors, may put them through a lot, but it, like, after all it's said and done, it does look amazing when they do that. It's
genuine authentism.
I think there should be a certain extent, though. Like you hear the stories about Linda Blair and Burstyn getting hurt. I really don't think anybody should get hurt on set. It's not worth it.
I don't think anybody needs to get hurt on
set.
Yeah.
That one thing I understand.
They said that he also brought guns with blanks.
Yeah.
To shoot for shock value.
Jason Miller, like, he shot the gun near Jason Miller's ear just to get an authentic reaction off of him. He's like, I didn't need that to look startled. Like, I didn't need a gun going off near my face.
And then he slapped the priest like for the ending scene to try to get a reaction out of him.
He said he gave his last rites about 15 times. It's 2 a.m. He said, "My best friend is dying. What more do you want me to do?" And he said, "Do you trust me?" "Well, yeah, I trust you." And he whacked him across the face.
Oh my god!
And that's why his hand's shaking at the end.
You can absolutely see. Now, on the other hand, would you rather have a director who insists on going for realism in that way and getting as few shots as possible, or would you rather work with someone like Kubrick who insists that you do it 173 times?
Yes.
Oh, you want it over and done with?
Oh man.
But Exorcist, I think, had a budget of $5 million, I believe, and it went over.
Well, they went over shooting a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't it supposed to be like a 98-day shoot and it went for like 220 or something?
A year, I think.
It was crazy.
Yeah, it was a long shoot for this movie.
And Linda Blair was only 12, and I want to say, of course, except for Lord Damien, we weren't around at that time. But supposedly when she read for the part, they had all the foul language there too, and her mom was and her mom asked her how it went, and she said, "I really can't tell you."
Yeah, I know because she was really hesitant, saying, "I can't say these bad words," and the director's like, "You can say them. It's fine. It's
Reagan. It's not Linda Blair who's saying it.
Right.
That was the okay key.
Okay.
But it was kind of cool. Her mom was actually in the movie too. She was one of the nurses when they were doing the thing for the arteries.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that either.
I just read that recently and it caught me off guard because I was like, "You're really going to be in the one scene where your daughter's getting blood drawn?"
William Peter Blatty had a cameo, I think, in it too.
He did.
But on the movie set portion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's funny. We've mentioned twice now the medical procedures that she undergoes as far as testing, and more people in the audiences, like when they talk about like the experience that the audiences had as far as people fainting or vomiting because of the extreme the gore, the violence, or whatever. More
Barf bags in the movie theater.
More people actually had problems with the medical procedures that she undergoes than the things that she actually goes through during the exorcism.
Wow, that's my thing too. Every time I see that needle, well, the needle is like this. And for anybody who can't see it, it's...
Our audiences can't see how big the needle is.
It's probably about 6 to 8 inches.
It's about a 6 to 8 inch needle. And it goes in her neck. Her neck. And then you see it get pulled out, and blood's just squirting.
Ugh, yeah.
Truthfully, I don't know if that's medically accurate, the squirting blood, because I feel like that's very unsanitary.
Well, I mean, they could have been bad doctors then, too.
I assure you that depending on where you stick somebody with anything pointy, a lot of blood is going to come out.
Sounds like a personal problem.
I have to put newspapers down every time I have a meal.
Isn't it easier just with the plastic on the floor? It's easier to roll it up.
Go through a lot of tarps.
Becomes Dexter.
That'll be your ghoul's name is Dexter.
Oh, sure.
Lay the plastic down for you.
But the amount of the experiences that people were having as far as the filming goes, like the barfing and the vomiting and the fainting and everything that happens, the studio was actually sued because some guy got sick while trying to leave the movie theater, tripped and broke his jaw. The company apparently settled out of court for an undisclosed sum.
That's how it usually is.
They probably just try to just shut them up and get rid of them.
Yeah.
But it probably makes good publicity, even though
Oh my god, yeah.
But, I mean, just think. It's like any horror story by the campfire.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we were younger, it was like, hey, can we hear the scary stories? No, you're too young. Well, why can't we hear them? You'll get scared. Well, what's so bad about them? Like, what's up with this Exorcist movie that everybody's getting sick and leaving the theater? You know, what's up? What is going on with that?
Oh, in the 50s, they craved that kind of publicity.
Oh,
I mean,
my God.
William Castle, it was absolutely infamous.
Yeah.
Like, handing out like fake life insurance policies.
The father of the gimmick. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, hang a skeleton from the ceiling of the movie theater.
House on Haunted Hill.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah.
And marketing at that time was so different than what it is today. I mean, word of mouth, which is technically still the greatest form of marketing, that was what they really went by. Because I don't want to say TVs were in everybody's house, but I think they were getting around. Mm-hmm. So you had maybe some commercials here and there, and then you had radio. That was still pretty.
If you had a TV, you had money.
Newspapers, which are going out of style now too. I mean, now if it's not on the cell phone, or we got things like Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb,
Metacritic,
even Twitter, Twitter. So at that time, to hear people saying, "Oh yeah," I mean, I remember Robert Englund, I think, was the one who said he saw The Exorcist in the theater and noticed somebody just drenched in sweat, just running out. And you could tell in a dark theater, just drenched in sweat, and ran out of the theater.
Yeah.
You can't buy that kind of publicity.
No.
You can't. You don't see that nowadays. You just don't.
When was the last time a horror movie had an impact like that? I want to say Blair Witch.
I would say Blair Witch
say
because it convinced the entire world that it was real when it was fake.
And that was all based on the marketing.
The internet marketing campaign.
It was this is it a real movie?
A website.
And then you had people saying, "Oh, I left the theater feeling weird and nauseous," and it's like, yeah, well, no, it does because the camera's going like this.
Shaky cam. Oh yeah.
And then it instantly became cliche.
Yeah.
People realize, they can't actually show people dying on camera and show it to the public. Like, there's no way they'd get away with something like that. Then it becomes Cannibal Holocaust, where the directors got arrested 10 days after the film was made.
But also, just think at that time, nobody really saw makeup like that on Linda Blair either. And it's this slow progression. Like they say, she's got these apple cheeks, a button nose, and is this innocent, happy-go-lucky girl, and then all of a sudden it is kind of like why her? And I think that's even like what they say in the movie is like, why her?
Right.
And I think it was, what was Von Sydow's? Father Merrin. And he's talking to, what was Jason Miller's name? Father Karras. And Father Karras was the one who said, why her? And Father Merrin said, it's because the devil wants to make you think God doesn't love you and that he's going to inhabit this girl to trick you. And it's like,
very psychological.
Oh, very.
Very.
And it really makes you think. And, you know, I'm not a father, but I would think, like, if that's my kid, I'd be fuming because it's like, I don't know what to do.
That's kind of what was really interesting about Ellen Burstyn's character is that she's this Hollywood actress. She's making money. She's making a career of making movies, and she has all this money and all this publicity and all this great credit. And no matter how much money you throw at this problem, it's not getting any better.
Nowhere.
And that's what makes it
more getting worse.
She's having these conversations with like these 80 doctors, and they have no idea what's going on with her daughter. And no matter how much money she throws at the table, it's not working. It's not helping. Mm-hmm. It gives you that fear of paranoia, and no matter where your status is in life, there are some things you just can't help. There are just some things you can't fix to solve your problems.
And actually, and part of her costuming also that she actually added was to show that despite everything that she has at her disposal, she's ill-equipped to fight a war based on faith. Mm-hmm. And in order to try to do that, they focus a little bit, and I know what she did. She actually bought a charm bracelet with a horseshoe on it, mm-hmm. and that was like her adding a little something to the characters. Like, this is it. It's just like this tiny little bit of superstitious nonsense that she holds on, and, mm-hmm. and that's what she has, and that's all she's equipped with, because she's not a person of faith, and she doesn't know how to go about doing this.
Right.
But it's a little. I love little things like that, like the little details.
Oh, me too.
Like, that even actors bring onto set and costumes and add things to bring up their character.
The little details go a long way. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said, just even if Linda Blair didn't have the contacts in, mm-hmm. I don't think it would have worked as well. Mm-hmm. And the teeth. You got to have the teeth and the cuts and the contacts, yes. Because otherwise it just doesn't work. I mean, and if people were afraid of Kiss and Alice Cooper at that time, I can only imagine why they were the way they were in the theater.
I think Linda Blair's makeup was a lot more graphic than what Kiss or Alice Cooper could put on. Well,
but what I'm saying,
Cooper,
but you know what I'm saying.
But I understand. It's like that whole setup, the whole like her eyes being sunken in, everything coming out, the oozing. Yeah, like, dude, that's gonna fuck you up when you're looking at it. Like, mm-hmm. What the fuck is she actually physically going through? Because, like, everything is coming out of her face and literally out of her stomach.
Yeah.
Yes.
Her stomach. Oh yeah, that's
hot pea soup.
And it's a good thing that they actually went without makeup too, because the original makeup design that failed like testing was what we see later on is the white face of the demon that shows up in the darkness. Mm-hmm. That was actually the failed makeup test.
Oh, okay.
on the stunt actress. So they brought it in some way, but they decided to go a different direction.
So wait.
Actually, on Reagan.
The failed makeup, they're like, we still already have this concept. We're just going to throw it in like a quick, here you go.
Sure, why not? We've done it. We've spent the money on it. We've taken a shot of it. Let's use it somewhere.
It looks good. On to the next
one. But even Linda Blair was apparently freaked out by the makeup because they had to put the exact same makeup on the stunt dummy of her. And they had to sit her next to the stunt dummy when she would go through makeup in the morning so that they could get it exactly right. And she hated sitting next to that thing. She was terrified. I can only imagine. She was terrified of her own stunt dummy.
Speaking of the stunt dummy, I've seen the sit up, for the first initial head spin. Mm-hmm. Not the second one, not the one where it went all the way around, but the first one where it just sat up. Yeah. And it honestly reminded me of the Annabelle doll. I wonder if that actually had some sort of influence as to what the Annabelle doll looked like.
I can see that.
For the Conjuring movie. Because, the real Annabelle doll looks nothing like...
Yeah, it's just
So, it just like with the dress and the way the face and the hair was, I was like, it kind of struck me...
It's totally possible. I mean, as influential as this movie has been, over the years, all the parodies and all the homages to everything.
Same production company, Warner Brothers. They produce the Conjuring films and the Annabelle films, so it makes sense. I can see that.
And going back to what you said about Linda Blair, stunt actress, she actually played a big part in it and doesn't really get too much credit for her part in the movie.
Neither the stunt actress nor the voice actress who actually does the demon's voice during the movie. She actually had to sue so that she could be credited for it.
Yep.
After the movie first came out.
Yeah.
Well, and the whole thing behind it, though, she originally didn't want the credit. She wanted it all to be on Reagan, Linda Blair. But then when she saw how popular it got, she's like, well, I did all this work. I should now get a little bit of credit for it.
Did she say that, or was that a studio thing?
It was her originally.
Okay.
And the studio backed it up, and then, but she felt that she wanted the credit because the amount of crap that she did to her voice. To
Oh
get
my
that
God.
Swallowing raw eggs.
Chain smoking, drinking to alter her voice.
That, she strapped herself down to the chair and actually put it on her throat so she could get that really deep. And then I think she was a recovering alcoholic, but she needed somebody there so she could get the whiskey voice.
Didn't they also kind of tie her up, similar to Linda Blair too, to
like
make her
hands,
feel like
the throat, everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I can see why she wanted to give Linda Blair the credit, but still, like, she put her body through hell to get that.
Yeah.
So, like, either way, they should have just thrown it in there no matter what.
Oh yeah.
And that's not, of course, to not take away any of the credit from Linda Blair's actual performance.
No.
It was still a great performance.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That girl gets the hell beat out of her.
She does.
Literally.
I almost kind of wonder exactly what her voice did actually sound like while filming the actual scenes, though. Considering when she first delivers her lines, she actually stunned Max von Sydow into silence.
He was so offended.
He completely forgot his lines while filming because he was completely taken aback by this foul-mouthed 12-year-old.
Look at this little girl, cute as she is, swearing at you. What is your first reaction? Is not going to be like, well, I'm going to give this line. No, it's going to be like, what the fuck did you just say?
That's
like, here's the Christmas list, and your name is off. But yeah, the stunt woman too. She played a huge part, and she was actually brought on for the masturbation scene with the cross originally.
Oh, just hearing that.
Yeah, I know. But effective though, huh?
Yeah.
After all these years, it's something that makes you go, "Wait, what'd you say?" It's like, yeah,
that happened.
That's in the movie.
Honestly, like, when they we're talking about it, like, not really talking about, when they showed in the movie, like, obviously they're going to cut out a lot of the extra graphic stuff they had in the book, and I'm kind of glad because it's really bad. Like, come on, she actually ends up breaking her nose because of how hard she's going with it in there. I'm like, I'm good with whatever we got to see. Like, we don't need any more than that.
We don't need more than that.
The book, it's far more bloody. There's far more involved. She actually climaxes. We don't need to see all that from a 12-year-old on screen.
Right.
That's where a difference between a book and a movie, like having limitations from a movie, are good.
Right. Look at Stephen King's It that came out 2 years ago. I'm glad there are certain things that were not put in that film that were in the book. If you read the book, you know what I'm talking about.
That one scene.
Beverly Marsh.
Well, the stunt actress who they used for that, I had read that Linda Blair was actually there for most of the actual crucifix masturbation scene. She did a lot of that herself, but the other actress was brought on so that because they wanted somebody with more heft to smack the mother away, and that's the scene where she hurts her back, isn't it? But they had to have a stunt actress because Linda Blair wasn't big enough to pull it off.
Well, I think they also said, like, the way she did backhand, it just looked like something a child would do, and it just looked like she didn't have the strength or the muscles to really give that, like, power.
Right.
But if you think about it, a child possessed wouldn't matter how big you really are. Like, even the daintiest person demon possessed is going to have
I agree. I agree.
But I think from a cinematic point of view, as far as like bringing some from depth of reality to it, or
I think it's that difference between illusion versus delusion.
Yeah.
Like, if you see it, and even though you go, okay, I understand that can happen, but it's one of those things where it just kind of takes you out if it doesn't look it. I mean, especially because Friedkin was always, hurt you, do whatever I can to get what I want to make it look real. So, I mean, if he's looking for realism, that's probably why he went for it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, you want to see that bigger build.
And he was that kind of director because he did The French Connection.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
he
was that kind of director. Yeah.
We keep mentioning the stunt actress. Her name is Eileen Dietz.
Eileen Dietz.
Eileen Dietz. She doubled for the vomiting scene. She doubled for the for the scene we were just talking about. She's the one that actually did the spider walk. Mm-hmm. So she's like, there's basically 3 different people have to come together to make possessed Reagan. It's mostly Linda Blair, but a lot of the major stuff that people remember are are the combination of the stunt actress and the voice actress.
Sometimes it takes more than one person to create a character.
Oh yeah,
without a doubt. I mean, Darth Vader wouldn't be Darth Vader without James Earl Jones.
True.
And who's actually in the bloody suit? What's his name?
David Prowse.
David Prowse.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't remember his name for the moment.
Yeah.
It's like I love that the only other movie I've ever seen David Prowse in is Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
He's in Clockwork Orange.
He's the nurse who...
He's the
real?
He's
Yeah.
the bodyguard for the
He's the
right
nurse at the end, yeah.
Long hair with the black hair.
He looks
He's
like
is he a big guy?
like Clark Kent in Speedos.
Yes.
Oh my
Okay.
god. That's so funny. I gotta watch that movie again soon.
And that comes down to the brilliance of casting again. I mean, this movie is cast so extremely well, and Linda Blair, like, she beat out, what was it, like 144 other people who were up for this role of,
Something like that.
Yeah, it's
There
like
he is.
and like the names that were attached to this for. We're looking at pictures of
David
of
Prowse.
David Prowse.
He kind of looks like a fucked up Brad from Rocky Horror.
But the casting for this film, I mean, Linda Blair beat out how many other people? Like we said,
140 something, yeah.
140 something, a full gross of other people. She beat out for this. People who were up for the role were also the girl who played Violet Beauregard in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. She was actually up for that.
Oh, okay.
There's like a whole other people. Jamie Lee Curtis and
Really?
was actually up for it, but her mother ixnayed.
Isn't that funny?
Old Janet Leigh, Scream Queen.
Yeah, suppose.
And then look what happened to Jamie Lee later.
I know.
Yeah, really.
I got my own horror franchise.
Right. Supposedly Carrie Fisher and her mom Debbie Reynolds were actually up for the mother-daughter combo of this film. Also, there's a lot.
That'd be interesting.
That would have been.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
It might look good on paper. I think it could work, but
Carrie Fisher was a lot older though than what Linda Blair was at the time.
Yes, she.
At the time, I maybe
Star Wars came out in 77.
she was like 16.
Okay.
well,
I
Carrie.
think-
When Carrie passed away, wasn't she 60?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
But I think she was only like 16 or 17 when she did the first Star Wars movie.
That young? Okay. I thought she was a little bit older.
Yeah,
Okay.
she was in like 18 to 20.
Yeah, so she was
Yeah.
probably like 12 or 13 when The Exorcist came.
Okay, then I can see that then. Okay.
And they were actually letting people who were a little bit older go out for the part of Reagan as long as they could look that young.
Okay.
And like supposedly the director was so frustrated by their lack of options, despite 144 people showing up, that he actually was considering just hiring little people actors.
Oh my god. Oh, that may not have been taken seriously.
That's probably would have been a bad decision.
No.
Carrie Fisher was born in 1956, and Linda Blair was born in 1959. So Linda Blair would have been a little younger.
Yes.
3 years younger.
3 years
yeah.
younger. Okay.
Yeah. Not that much of a difference.
No.
It could have happened. But it's like we said earlier, Jack Nicholson was up for,
Yeah.
up for the role of Father Karras. It's like nobody's going to see that. And apparently the Friedkin cast Jason Miller as Karras after seeing him on Broadway.
Okay.
Said the performance that he saw on Broadway reeked of failed Catholicism, and that's actually why he cast him. This is Jason
Failed Catholicism.
reeked of failed Catholicism, and that earned him Jason Miller earned this is his first movie role.
First movie role. Okay.
And wasn't Father Karras's best friend the other priest? He's actually a real priest who knew Friedkin, right?
He is actually a real priest. He was a Jesuit priest. I think he retired a year or two ago. He was actually involved in some controversy a few years ago because he actually teaches at a Catholic college or something. But he's far more liberal than what most people think of when they think of a Catholic priest, and that earned him. He's got no problem with foul language in the classroom. He'll curse quite often, and he has a lot of liberal thinking. And that I think they were looking at firing him, and there was like a whole rally behind him to keep him instated in his job. But yeah, he was a real Catholic priest. Friedkin actually asked him to perform an exorcism.
I do remember hearing that.
On the set because people were worried about all the things that were going on. And he said, I don't think that's a good idea because I think that'll actually make people more anxious. Okay. So he didn't perform an exorcism. There was no exorcism on set. But they did have another priest come in and just give a blessing and talk to people who might have been anxious.
Yes.
Well, I believe it was Jason Miller, too, who he had explained his 2 cents. I forget if it was to a priest or just somebody religious. He said that he was doing this movie called The Exorcist and went on to explain it. And he actually received... like some sort of holy trinket, I believe, and he said, "What's this for?" And it was because they're exposing the devil, and the devil doesn't like that, and he'll take it out on others, is what they say. So they said, "Here's a holy, trinket to protect yourself." That was a story I'd heard.
I wonder what they gave him. I actually usually wear a ring with the medal of Saint Benedict on it. It's actually used in exorcisms. That's why I hold on to it myself.
Well, you've done how many of them?
300 years at this. You're bound to come across.
Got some experience.
Right.
I think you need to build that resume a little more.
Right.
It's 2019 now.
Gotta update that thing a bit. I know that there was a lot of other casting choices going through here, and I can't remember all of them off the top of my head.
There really is so much to talk about this movie.
There's a lot.
I think we covered the main gist of it. I don't think there's really too much else that was secretive or that nobody really knew. I think we need to talk about the ending of the movie because that is definitely a big point. I noticed some people who have seen it, they do kind of they kind of tend to think the ending's a bit of a downer. Like there's not like a triumphant win or so,
It kind of is, but it's like a big sigh of relief.
Yeah.
When it ends, because this movie from the beginning doesn't let you out with that claustrophobia and with that dread. And then finally, when Father Karras plunges through the window and he dies, and Regan is finally weeping and crying, and it's like, oh my God, it's finally over. Like, maybe she's back to normal again.
I think another thing, though, is the 2 priests, spoiler alert, they die.
Wait, like we said, if you haven't seen this movie, there's
something wrong with you if you haven't
I'm
seen
not
this
denying
movie.
that. I'm not denying
This movie's 40 years old, and you haven't seen it by now.
Yeah. God, yeah.
But, you go in and you see Father Marin is dead. Father Karras goes in and sees he's dead. Mm-hmm. And then he sees that Regan is unhooked. So Father Karras then attacks Regan, the devil, and he keeps saying, take me, take me. And finally, the devil goes into Karras, and you can tell he's trying to fight it, and he sees Regan crying, and then he just screams, no, and he jumps out the window. And that's actually like a really horrific scene, especially for that time. Like how the stunt double pulled that off.
Plunge through the window, then go down that flight of stairs.
And it rolled down heavy.
Dude, the gap between the window and the fence and where the stairs are at, it's like quite a
And isn't
distance.
that fence, doesn't it have like the steel spikes
metal.
at
It does.
Like, damn.
He had to launch himself far enough to miss that and then hit the stairs.
Oh.
So it's kind of like you guys said, it's like there's a build up for it, but then after that, like when he does do this and everything ends and Reagan's like now getting better, it's like, yeah, it's a sigh of relief, but it really is like, here you go, this is it. This is what's going to happen. And like even at the end when everything is done and the priest and the cop are talking, like they figured out that this is done. So what are they talking about? What, Wuthering Heights?
Going to the movie.
Yeah.
That becomes a conversation throughout.
It's a running gag throughout the entire movie. He's trying to get someone to go to the movies with him, and it continues on into the sequel too. I think until they
Does he really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what he does. Oh my God.
I think in the sequel they finally
movie.
go see It's a Wonderful Life.
That fucking movie. Another reason to not see it.
I like that the ending of the film though. If after all of that, it's kind of ambiguous too.
Yeah.
Like you're never quite sure if Father Karen Karras has actually Karen. I put the two
together. You combine the names.
Father Karras, you don't know if he's beaten it because he's found his faith, which he's been struggling with through like the entire film.
Because of his
that's
mom.
really why he's here.
We didn't talk about his mom.
We don't know if he's finally found a way to beat it because he's found his faith again and he's strong in his faith, or if it's simply because he's found something else to care about and he's willing to sacrifice himself to help somebody else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of leaves it open whether or not he's winning because of one thing or the other, or if it's some combination of the two.
Right. There's a moment, I know, like, right before he goes into the bedroom to see Father Merrin and Reagan, he's, like, hunched over, sitting on the steps, like, beaten. Like, this exorcism is not going well. It's failing.
Well, not to take you away, but they do say that real exorcisms are, like, very exhausting.
They are. Oh, yeah.
So...
It's exhausting. It's not working. Nothing's going their way. And then Ellen Burstyn goes up and says, "Is my daughter going to die?" Mm-hmm. And then he just kind of stops, looks at her, and says, "No, she's not going to die." I think that's like that little spark of the moment where, like, I'm getting my faith back. Like, I'm not going to let this little girl die. I'm going to go back in there and make this right. It's like you see a little spark of him trying to reignite his faith at that moment. That was a really powerful moment. It's such a tiny little scene. Tiny little scene, but he's
Again,
beaten.
The little things.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's beaten. He's tired. It's not working. And then just that question that she asks him, "Is my daughter going to die?" No, she's not.
And up to that point, it's almost not something that's actually questioned throughout the movie. It's like as much as Reagan is going through during the exorcism and through the possession in general, you never really get a sense of question of whether or not this is going to end in her death. Mm-hmm. It's like it's just a question of whether or not this is going to continue on, and if is she going to be stuck this way. There's never anything that gives you any kind of indication as far as is her life in danger or just her immortal soul.
Yeah.
And maybe at that point when the mother asks, that's when it finally dawns on him, like, this could be, she's actually in mortal peril as well as immortal peril.
Yeah.
I think it's also more of a how are they going to overcome this? Mm-hmm. Because at that time, how do you fight the devil? How do you fight possession? You know,
Faith.
Yeah,
Faith.
I mean, get a holy hand grenade.
Count for 5 seconds.
I think we also forgot...
3 seconds.
3 seconds.
I think we should mention, too, that not only was... William Peter Blatty, he wrote a book about it, but this was also based on a true story.
It was. Except the child wasn't a girl, it was a boy.
No, it was a boy. And he did do his research, and he asked Catholic priests about the behind the scenes to the real exorcism, and they said they cannot expose any of this. They could, I think they told him, but they said you can't have what we tell you directly in your story.
Yeah, what we see in the movie is not a full official exorcism. It's kind of interpretation of the actual exorcism practices. It's long and complicated. It can last days, even weeks or months at times. Yeah, depending on who's doing it and what's happening, of course.
All right,
but. I was going to mention something else, and now it totally slipped my mind.
Should we go around and talk about the scenes? Like, our favorite scenes at all?
Yeah. Newports?
Newports? Go ahead. I'll leave it up to the experts.
Didn't you go to film school?
Yeah, you did go to film school.
No, I saw this movie like 10 years ago one time, and...
at least you saw it.
Yeah,
I saw
you did see it. Yeah.
So we're not spoiling anything for you.
No.
By the way, the priest dies. Both of them. I'm sorry to wreck the ending. The priest is...
No, I know that.
What's the body count of this movie? It's only 4, isn't it? It's the two priests.
The director.
The
Director of the film.
Right. I mean the body count in the movie, not like all the bad crap.
It's 4 in the movie, 9 outside of the movie.
the first person that falls out the window and
Bert, the director of Ellen Burstyn's movie,
right. And when they fall out the window, their head gets twisted around.
Yes.
When Linda Blair's when Reagan actually twists her head around during the possession, it's supposed to mimic what happened to the director when they fell out.
That makes sense. Okay.
That's when the line is, "Do you know what she did?"
Yeah.
It's referring to the death of the director whose head was twisted around, and William Blatty actually said that when Friedkin planned for this shot, he actually misinterpreted what the book says. It's like in the movie, her head like spins around like a full 360, but in the book it's only like a 180.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Not to take away anything from you. But yeah, like for me, this movie is top 5 horror movies of all time. I mean, this movie was nominated for Best Picture for a reason. A lot of people still think that this is a film that glorifies Satan. It's not. It's a movie about faith and redemption. For me, it gives an awareness of how important horror movies are to a lot of people and how it's an underappreciated genre. It really is. Because this is really the only true horror movie that was actually nominated for Best Picture. You can make a claim for The Sixth Sense, and you can make a claim for Silence of the Lambs. They were more psychological thrillers. They were mystery suspense movies. They weren't true horror movies, not like The Exorcist.
No.
And that's what makes it stand to this day. It stands the test of time. I mean, we've talked about a lot of scenes here that are just amazing. There's just... For me, it's the conversations. The conversations that take place that are just so interesting between not just Father Karras and the detective. Did we mention his name before? I don't know if we did or not.
The detective?
Who
I'm not... No, we didn't really mention him.
We mentioned him a lot, but like his investigation going on with Bert's death and how his head was turned completely around, whether or not that happened before he left the window or that was on the impact of the staircase. I mean, this director, he made a staircase terrifying.
Yeah, he did.
Just both in the house and outside the house, he made a staircase terrifying. And this movie, it doesn't utilize the jump scare tactic that has plagued horror movies to this day. The jump scare. There are no jump scares in this movie. It's done with great sound design, with great music. There's not a whole lot of musical score, but the theme is still very iconic. That's one thing I love about this movie is that you don't feel like a cat jumps in front of you and you get this little burst of sound effect. Like, that doesn't happen. This movie, like I said from the beginning, it doesn't let you out until Father Karras goes through the window and then basically Reagan is back to normal. Like, even from like the time when Father Marin is, in the Middle East, the clock stops in his office, and then you just feel like this uneasiness. They're just little things like the dogs out in the yard, like tearing over like a piece of meat, and then the statue in the distance. Like, there's just these little imagery that just stays with you until the very end of the movie. It doesn't let you out. And, I'm glad, the contortionist scene was added because I saw the 2000 version. I didn't see the original cut of what it was back in 73, but that contortionist scene going down the staircase and her mouth is just drooling blood. I'm like, ugh. That was what really... That almost sent me to the hills. That scene right there.
Would you say that's your favorite scene?
I would probably... Well, that scene and then the conversations, I guess, between Father Karras and then the devil, they were actually quite interesting when she's speaking the different languages and then when they're just having this talk about, oh, wasn't it an excellent day for an exorcism? Like, you'd want that? You want exorcism?
I think the reason for that is because that was supposed to be Pazuzu getting Marin back.
But yeah,
because when he first enters the house,
it's
you even hear it go, Marin.
That's true. But yeah, it just becomes this big psychological battle between... He's losing it.
I can't handle that fucking name. I'm sorry.
What name? Pazuzu.
Look at you guys right now.
Aren't you glad it wasn't said in the original?
I know.
Would it ruin the experience for you?
Because, dude, ever since
just
I've seen I've been knocking it out of my head.
But yeah, the final thing I'll say is just the psychological war between the devil and Catholicism between Father Karras and Marin. Just, she's strapped to the bed, and that voice still terrifies me. It terrifies William Friedkin to this day.
Just don't say Pazuzu.
It doesn't sound human. It doesn't. And like, you don't really see kind of good, authentic voiceover actors like that can do that much punishing, damaging quality to their voice. I mean, there are some still really great voiceover actors, Mark Hamill and Brad Dourif, that are still amazing. But this is just, it's iconic. It doesn't sound human. It sounds like an entity, and that's what really was effective. This movie is, I just love it so much. I just love that. Horror movies need to get more attention for not just not going beyond the Oscars here and there, but they just need more recognition in general. And then they just start making, because it wasn't until 2007 where basically horror movies were in a funk, and then indie horror kind of saved it for a bit. And indie horror is still going strong to this day, but this was mainstream horror. You don't really see a whole lot of great mainstream horror that still lingers to fans. And the fact that this was one of those movies that shook the world. People wanted to have exorcisms after this movie came out. People wanted to go to church to have demons exorcised from them, because this is a movie that it might be fun.
Well, have you seen it? Everyone thinks
they have a demon inside them.
On a Sunday morning looks like they're having a fantastic time.
Yeah.
Right. Just like the Blair Witch Project. This is a movie that shook the world. I mean, and it's still being felt to this day. And
do you have a least favorite scene?
I have a least favorite scene.
If not, it's okay.
I don't think I do have a least favorite scene of this movie. Actually, there's one little bit I want to mention about the very end when Reagan sees the crucifix on the priest when she doesn't remember any of it. I'm glad she actually doesn't remember anything about what happened with the exorcism. That's kind of interesting in that first movie, because the second movie goes into more about that. We're not going to talk about that. But she sees the crucifix on I forget the priest's name, but she runs after him. You're like, oh my God, what's she going to do to this guy? And then she just gives him a hug and a kiss. I'm like, oh, don't do that. But do that. But don't do what I thought you were going to do was attack him. And then that final shot of just like them two walking away, and then the score plays. And then that one last shot with the staircase going down. Mm-hmm. So good. So good.
Jeff?
How the fuck am I supposed to follow that? Well, shit, I'm like, well, you hit like everything. I'm like,
well, there's more that you can talk about.
I know, but still, like, you went in like great detail, and I'm like, well, I'm fucking gonna sound stupid.
Pazuzu.
Just think of Pazuzu.
But truthfully, like, I feel like this movie does hold up in the test of time. No matter what we think that it doesn't, no matter what it is, it literally does hold up. Like, just, what was it, we watched it last week or so? Mm-hmm. Honestly, like, I still enjoy watching it. There's nothing I could complain about it. But I would say just if you watch both sets of movies, like the theatrical to the directors, you're going to enjoy both of them. Because, like, what they expand into the director's cut makes it more enjoyable. And, like, truthfully, like, the one scene that I really think is kind of fucked up is when the mom comes down to the basement. She's playing with the Ouija board. Already setting the tone for the movie with that, too. She's not really, like, hesitant about, like, why she's playing with the Ouija board. Everyone knows that there's something wrong with it. And the fact that it does move by itself. And she thinks it's her daughter. But, like, right there, that sets your tone for, like, yeah, there's more shit to come. And, like, I feel like that is a good starting point for showing that Reagan is eventually going to get possessed. And then during the whole dinner party, when she starts relieving herself onto the floor, I was like, there really wasn't as much of a shock to everyone in the room, because, like, it made it seem like they all knew this was coming. When truthfully, like, I feel like there would have been a lot more shock to it. That was probably like a low point in that movie, because, like, yeah, I know you're all actors. I know that this is all what's happening. But yeah, this girl, we're saying, what, 12 I think it was?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She's literally pissing all over the floor and just blank-faced the whole time. The only person that really reacts well is her mom, because, like, well, my daughter's sick now. And she kind of even, like, nonchalantly, because she was embarrassed that her daughter was pissing all over the floor. That I felt was, like, yeah, it was really good acting, but I feel like everybody outside of those two really should have acted a little bit better with that.
Okay.
Because I feel like the reaction wasn't always there. But it's saying that, like, literally, what, a 5-minute scene out of a almost 2-hour-long movie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There really isn't nothing else. Like, I'm damn near nitpicking at this point. Just to say something bad. But, like, even towards the end, like, he's saying, like, when they're doing the exorcism and you can see that the younger priest is starting to feel everything. Like, he's starting to feel run down, but then you see, like, he is starting to question his faith. And, like, he's like, am I really up to the challenge of taking out this demon? And then that's why he eventually leaves the room. And then the elder priest goes in and obviously has a heart attack. Spoiler alert. And it's like, but as he said, the mom asking if the child's going to die. Like, yeah, it's going to reignite everything. So, but it's like, with all the key elements there, it's like, yeah, there's a lot going on. There's really no real low point. Like I said, I had a nitpick for a 5-minute scene.
Lord Damien, what is your favorite, least favorite, and what do you take away from it?
Well, see, I have the same problem Jeff does. I mean, John talked about it so much and in such great detail, to close off. It's like it's hard to come up with anything different. But yeah, again, we keep saying it because it's true. This movie is absolutely iconic. I mean, coming from my standpoint, I feel a little bit like Beetlejuice sometimes at the time, though, because I've seen The Exorcist about 167 times.
It keeps getting funnier.
I don't honestly think it keeps getting funnier, but I think I appreciate it more and more as the years go on, especially considering the state that horror has drifted into, apart from some of the independent stuff these days. I mean, it's this movie is all about I think the word you used was claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Yes. And it really does feel like that. As the tension rises, things become more and more constricted, and this movie is like just dripping with atmosphere. And I'm a huge fan of atmosphere, especially in horror movies.
It's a huge part of horror.
It is. And it's probably cliche, but I think honestly my favorite scene in the movie is probably that when Father Merrin first pulls up in the cab, and we get that iconic shot of the light from the room
poster
coming down.
Yeah.
That's which Friedkin was inspired to do after seeing some
Bosch paintings.
Not Bosch, but there was actually a series of oil paintings that he was inspired by, and it's like just that shot alone. It's like you see that, and almost everybody can instantly identify what movie this is if they were to see that. But yeah, like the atmosphere, this is that perfect combination of absolutely everything coming together to create something which becomes more and more tense and terrifying as it goes on. It's like there's no jump scares. There's everything just builds and builds and tightens and tightens. It's like it's like you're being suffocated by a boa constrictor towards the end of the film. And it's like and that's what John was saying is like suddenly there's a release. But it still kind of leaves it open ended, and every shot every shot is fantastic. The acting, the voice acting, the stunt work on this is phenomenal, and the amount of sacrifices that people put themselves through in order to put this is something that I appreciate the hell out of. I'm not sure how much more I can build on that.
Yeah, it was great. Seriously.
I don't know if I have I don't really know if I have a least favorite scene.
If not, it's okay.
in the film. But again, I mean, it's also partially one of the reasons I also love the film is also because it's been so influential because it is such a part of history, and there is so much history and lore and detail into the film. It's like that's what I love. I love atmosphere and the little details that people put into things, like the symbolism behind every tiny little thing that goes into stuff. And we get a piece of history here that people can see that people might not be able to see anymore, even if it is just the archaeological dig site at the beginning of the movie, because it's the ancient city of Hatra in Iraq, which was almost completely wiped out by ISIS over the last 5 years.
Oh, okay, wow.
So we get to see like at least glimpses and pieces of stuff that people might not be able to ever experience in real life. But again, yeah, it's iconic. It's almost virtually perfect, and there's absolutely a reason this movie has stood the test of time and will continue to do so. I don't know what else I can say about it.
That was perfect.
Well, I mean, I really don't have much to add to it other than basically what you guys said. And it's funny you mentioned the poster because I have to say that's probably my favorite scene too. It's just something about when he arrives and, you talk about sets and that lighting and the atmosphere and just seeing the car drive off, because it's like that driver has no idea what's going on. It's almost, I guess you could kind of compare it to when you think about it. We've all probably have encountered a serial killer in our lives at some point and we don't even realize it. It's like, here's a guy who just drove this dude to this house.
Yeah, essentially his death.
Yeah.
Right.
And basically you're seeing him for the last time, and who knows what that conversation in the car is, if they even have a conversation. Right. I mean, because you're really not supposed to talk about, or the guy could think, oh, this dude's a wacko, kind of exorcist some girl.
The usual.
But
get out.
But you know, it was one of those things where if you appreciate art, you can see a sense of everything. You know, there is a sense of romance in the scene with the way the lighting and the structure. And what's he looking at? Is that light really, like, even though it's something ominous up there, but it's almost like a heavenly looking beam coming down. And it's coming down on the guy who's essentially there to save the girl. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because he's a dark figure when he arrives. When in Iraq, he was in all white or tan.
That's interesting.
You know, which is actually like a real funny thing, because I had heard Freakin' had a thing for the different colors.
Color choices.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
So I thought that was interesting too. Like maybe the light is, like he got away to Iraq to get this light, but he seemed like he lost some faith, but he kind of has to go back to a dark place to get his faith back and to restore faith, and not just the mom, not just the girl, but in Father Karras as well. It's kind of like, I guess you could say, like a little bit of evil goes a long way, is how it is. But yeah, I gotta say that's probably like my favorite image, and it's almost like it's on now.
Yeah.
You know, you got all these questions, all these, what are we doing? What do we try? Well, now you break out the big guns, and it comes in such a dramatic fashion that you just feel it, like something's going to change. Just like how you were saying with the Reagan, is my daughter going to die? Yeah. No. Like, to me, that is the turning point more than anything.
Yeah.
And that's what starts is my daughter going to die? No. So... But as all you guys said, between the sets, the lighting, the writing, I mean, there are some questions, but I don't know if that's because of symbolism reasons, maybe why questions are raised. But possibly. What makes this movie special to me is no matter what they do, I don't think there'll ever be another movie about the devil besides a documentary from somebody who has actually seen him or dealt with him, unless it is actually Jesus Christ himself.
Right.
That'll talk about him. And not Pazuzu.
Well, I haven't written my life story into a book. So,
I mean, there have been so many Exorcist movies that have come out in the last couple of years. They don't even hold a candle to this movie. This is the Jaws of the Exorcist movies. They've tried because they think it's all about the possession, when no, this movie goes even more about, like we've been talking about, faith.
Well,
and the build-up.
The other thing is, I know when I first started hearing about this movie, I was little. And I've always had a thing for knowing your enemy. And a lot of times growing up, my mom and dad didn't have advice about what exactly the devil is. And then this movie I find out about, and it's talking about possessing a kid. And I'm thinking, I'm a kid. So like the ultimate evil can just come in and take you
Anybody.
over.
Yeah.
And like, what kind of torture is that? It's... it raises a lot of questions, and it makes you go, maybe I should look into this a little more and be aware of my enemy and how to defeat him. Whether it's your belief, whether it's what you choose to believe, that's up to you. But it definitely is a movie that does bring awareness, and the end message is having the faith will restore faith in you and bring you back.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing
Newport, nothing. No, he's just here to listen.
I'd say, honestly, like, even with all the amount that it sparked, like, even they did the TV show that took place almost 30 years later.
That's right, they did that.
Like, it did show that, eventually Reagan is still going to be involved. Like, Pazuzu is...
I was saying!
Still going to come after her because it essentially just wanted her because she was the one that got away. And truthfully, it's like there's no matter how many Exorcist movies, no matter possession movies, like this will be the original. It'll actually hold to it. It's gonna.
It has everything.
Yeah,
there's. It does. As funny as it sounds, there's some comedy moments. There's even love story in it. You know, there's horror. There's laughter, and at the very end, like as you guys said, you can get out and go, oh, it's over.
If you can make it through, because this movie is not for the faint of heart.
And it's like, I can see why Kane Hodder said this is probably one of his favorite movies too. So
absolutely,
honestly, it holds up.
It's a go-to movie for sure every Halloween if you don't know what to watch.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll say something. You were talking about the movie, how it builds up and it's very tightly wound. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned before the show, it had won the writing Oscar.
Right.
Yeah, and it won an Oscar for sound.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk much about the sound or the soundtrack to this movie. I mean, there's a lot of like very good use of sound effects, but I mean, as far as music, he only used music for like transitional scenes.
Very limited, almost like the Alien vibe with Ridley Scott. Like, he cut a lot of Jerry Goldsmith's music for that movie, and
it didn't need music. Really.
It didn't really need music, no.
Which is odd because usually it's like a mood killer, and it really slows the pace down. But
there's just that iconic theme.
But music helps tell you how to feel during the film or scene, and the lack of it kind of leaves you open, which almost makes an audience feel even more paranoid.
Yeah,
it's like I don't know what I should be thinking at this point in time because there is nothing telling me other than exactly what I'm seeing. I have no other indication.
Yeah.
And I want to be the first person to say, after almost an hour, the power of Christ compels you.
Wow, and I didn't even realize none of us said that.
No one said
that.
I was timing it. How long is it going to take before somebody says that?
But we say Pazuzu how many days?
We said like what, 20 times?
Father Marin and Karras do say the power of Christ compels you. I think it's 14 times in the movie.
14 times.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Oh, that's it?
That's it, yeah.
You'd think it'd be more.
Yeah. It's like, how many times did Kim Basinger scream in Batman? I guess that's the next countdown. Does anybody else have anything to contribute, or is that a wrap on the episode?
I think that might be a wrap.
All right.
That sounds good.
Lord Damien, would you like to tell everybody how to catch you again on your show?
Sure. Again, the TV show that I'm running now is called Damien's Dreadfuls. I post my episodes up on YouTube. If you go to the YouTube username is Lord Damien McDonovan, all one word. You can check out my Facebook, Damien McDonovan also. My Twitter and Instagram account is @Lord_MacDonovan. I put out a new episode every month. I've been trying to do some movie reviews between episodes also. But my YouTube page has a ton of old episodes, some that Colin has actually helped me work on in the past. We did some movie marathons for a couple of years for RCN Cable. But now which has now evolved into my own actual show, not owned by RCN, so I can do whatever the hell I want with it. Definitely check that out. Check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and hit share and subscribe or whatever. You guys do some more iconic horror films we'll get to.
Sounds excellent. We appreciate it.
Well,
we appreciate you showing up today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. It's a bit late for me now that it's the middle of the afternoon, but
I'll cover you up.
I'll get some sleep in soon. That's fine. I'll just have to grab my very, very black umbrella as I walk out to the car.
All right, everybody, that wraps our podcast for this episode of The Exorcist. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Please, somebody help me.